Tom DeLonge co-founded one of the most popular bands of all time, Blink-182. Along with his side projects of Angels and Airwaves and Boxcar Racer, he was at the height of his musical career, and then he decided to walk away from all of it in pursuit of something completely different. Here's Tom DeLonge during an exclusive interview with Jason McMillan and Maureen Ellsbury on their hit web series, Spacing Out.
One of my first memories is being in 7th grade where I was walking, I had like an hour in junior high. It was like the first, school kind of system in junior high level where you get to walk between classes, so you have a few minutes. I, for some reason, had more than a few minutes, so I had to go to the library. And I was walking to this library and I didn't read books at all. Then, in school, I was like, books? Who wants to read books? I'm into skateboarding and stuff. So I'm like, well, if I have to read a book right now, I wonder if there's like any weird like UFO books. And I don't even know why that came to my attention. It was so odd because and all I found was a book that had something about one UFO and the Loch Ness Monster. But either way, it was cool and it was in my school library. And from that moment forward, it really sparked my interest. But there was a gap there. Until I was able to actually afford to buy a computer. So computers were really happening when I was 21. That's like the beginning of the 90s, like bam, things are happening with computers. So I signed a record contract and got my first paycheck. And the very first thing I did was I went out and bought this shitty like compact computer or something. And I brought it home, signed on, and I think I just typed in like UFOs or something, or Area 51, I don't even know, there's the common term. And at that time, it popped up the Desert Rat papers. Do you remember the Desert Rat?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I forgot his name. I want to say Gordon or something, or
I don't remember.
But it was the guy that lived in Rachel, Nevada, that just all he did was just blog and write about his ongoings at monitoring Area 51, because at that point, part of one of the peaks looking in were free. So the Navy didn't really wrap up the entire mountain range. One part of it was open. So he was able to go in there and do some quality stuff. And so I was instantly hooked. This is like fiction, but it's nonfiction. It's even better.
DeLonge would continue his pursuit, digging deeper and deeper into UFOs, which would eventually lead to a series of secret meetings with high-level government insiders.
The first time I met with a government official, it would have been in the back booth of a restaurant at an airport where I meet this person. He's a general, and he walks me into this vacant area of an airport restaurant, puts his briefcase down. Waiter comes over to take a drink, and he puts his hand up and says, we're just having a conversation, we don't need anything. And the guy's all like, well, okay, fine then, whatever. He said, walks away. And then he looked me in the eyes and said, it was the Cold War, and everything we did at the time was because nuclear war could break out any given day. It was a very real, palpable threat. And somewhere in there, we stumbled upon the UFO phenomenon. And I remember right when he said that, my heart just started beating like crazy in my chest. I got all the chills. And the next conversation that happened for an hour at that booth was extraordinary, life-changing, and scary.
Those meetings would ultimately lead to an advisory board that would eventually make up to the STARS Academy of Arts and Science. The organization included an elite team of former government and defense contractor insiders who would work behind the scenes to socialize the topic of UFOs and persuade the government to reveal what it knows about them. That team originally consisted of Jim Semivan, Dr. Hal Puthoff, Steve Justice, Chris Mellon, and Luis Elizondo. From there, we would eventually learn of the one secret Pentagon UFO program, known as ATIP. We'd see the now famous Navy UFO videos shot off the west and east coasts and officially acknowledged and released by the Department of Defense. And then we'd see, by request by the Senate Intelligence Committee, a preliminary assessment of the UFO phenomenon by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. All of this, in its weird and convoluted way, traced back to Tom DeLonge, but it also traced back to the meeting with whom Tom would call the General, who would allegedly set up DeLonge's team of advisors and would lead DeLonge down a path that is yet to be truly known. In November of 2016, WikiLeaks released a trove of emails from John Podesta, chair of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and, by all accounts, a huge advocate for UFO disclosure. Within those hacked emails were correspondence between John Podesta and none other than Tom DeLonge. In the emails, DeLonge would explain his meetings with the general. DeLonge would go so far as to name this general in the emails as one Major General William Neil McCasland. McCasland's career is definitely one that many UFO researchers have looked into with a curious eye. He retired from the US Air Force as a Major General after a 34-year career. He culminated his Air Force career as commander at the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where he led the USAF's $4 billion science and technology program. McCasland is accomplished in applied technology management and intelligence programs, ranging from science and technology investment planning to on-orbit space operations. McCasland holds a degree in astronautical engineering from the U.S. Air Force Academy. It would make logical sense for this to be not only the general in question, but a chronological string of experience that would make McCasland a very powerful force in both the United States military and in possession of the highest security levels of information pertaining to UFOs. Today, we're joined by 3 guests who have looked heavily into what could be the impetus for everything Tom DeLonge has done, dating back to those very first meetings he had with elite members of the government and military. We will discuss the 6 degrees of General McCasland and the subsequent chain of events that has led to where we are today and where we may be going in the ever-evolving story of UFOs in 2021.
This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome to this very special panel discussion today. I am calling this 6 Degrees of General McCasland, and we have an awesome panel with us today. We have, first and foremost, from the Debrief, Tim McMillan. Not first and foremost, that's not a slight against our other 2 panelists. Tim is here with us. We've got Zac Cichy, who is, I must quote, the only person on UFO Twitter who gets along with Mick West, Jeremy Corbell, Keith Clore, Steve Bassett, but is somehow still blocked by George Knapp.
That's all true.
From Project Human is with us. And last but not least, the newest member of the UFO Twitter family and community. We have @Inference on Twitter, but she is allowing us to use her name for the first time ever on Somewhere in the Skies. Britt, welcome to this very special panel discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, guys. So let's set the stage for what we're doing here today. This is General Neil McCasland, who some people might not even know who this dude is, or why he may be important to the discussion we're going to have today. And you guys are kind of the ones who have brought this name up and been like, we might want to look a little further into this person, because mainstream media doesn't seem to want to do it. And he might being the key word, be the connector to a lot of what's going on today. Maybe. But let's start, before we even get to General McCasland, I want to get your guys' initial thoughts of when To the Stars Academy, which I should mention, I've got a little shameless promotion here today, before To the Stars really started Secret Machines. Your initial thoughts when Tom DeLonge first came forward and said that he was starting this academy and all these advisors he was working with. I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard about it, I'm like, holy shit, is this it? Like, are we doing this? Is this disclosure that we've always dreamed of? So what were your initial impressions when Tom DeLonge first started talking about this stuff? Zac, let's start with you, man.
Sure, man. Thank you for having me on, by the way. It's an honor to be on this show. I thought of Dan Aykroyd.
Really?
Yeah, do you remember Dan Aykroyd came out a long time ago, as, super into this stuff. In fact, like, that's the reason why he, wrote Ghostbusters. He was really into paranormal, weird stuff. And to me, it was like, okay, here's another celebrity coming out who is super into weird stuff. And honestly, on a surface level, I didn't think a lot more of it when it first started to come to fruition, because even prior to the stars, Tom was doing interviews talking about the UFO issue, talking about why it's important, and I think he even did a couple debates with skeptics and things like that. But then obviously everything that happened with the New York Times article, and all the people that were involved into the Stars Academy, obviously it raised my eyebrows for sure. I didn't really know what to make of it, but as we're going to be kind of talking about on this show, one of the things that lended some amount of credibility to the efforts that he was making early on were actually those John Podesta 2016 WikiLeaks emails, where it turned out, oh my God, he really was talking to John Podesta. He really was in communication with, high level officials and people that should have some kind of they should know about this stuff. And so I started paying a little more attention. That's sort of the short version, I guess.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. No, I love it, man. Because again, like, this was a kind of a key moment, because we now were learning of all these people Tom was working with. We all thought he was full of shit, to be completely honest, until the Podesta emails came out, which I'm going to read the email in a little bit here. But Britt, let's go with you. What were your initial impressions when you first heard about, this former Blink-182 dude saying that, like, he was going to disclose the truth on UFOs or whatever his grand plans were? What did you think?
Well, I have to say, first and foremost, like, I just recently got into this topic.
Yeah.
The 60 Minutes episode on UAPs is actually what brought me over here.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'll never
Really?
forget, like, the day that aired. I was hanging out with a couple of my friends, right, from high school. And one of my buddies, super into Blink-182, and he was just like, yo, Tom DeLonge, yeah, he's really into that stuff. And I was like, oh, really? But besides that, I had no idea. First time I ever heard of Lou Elizondo was through that, right? And so, honestly, what should I say here? Like, I don't really have, like, any sort of feeling or anything except for, like, that's sick,
Curiosity,
like,
yeah.
Very curious, So, of course, like, when I was going through the WikiLeaks emails, when they first released, I'm pretty sure any curious mind, the first thing that they typed in on WikiLeaks was UFOs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's so crazy because, like, I never really listened to Blink-182. Like, I'm a weird 2000s kid, right? Like, very weird. I wasn't really into that scene, right? So when I was going through the whole entire thing, I don't think it even clicked with me at the time that it was Tom DeLonge, or who Tom DeLonge was Blink-182. Didn't even click. But I'll tell you one thing. I saw UFOs. And I saw a Roswell crash. And I did also see a name, General McCasland. So what do I think about it right now? Well, it's crazy. All of it's crazy. It is crazy that Tom DeLonge was able to get a hold and get all these people together, all these credible figures together. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a couple things that don't necessarily add up. And I'm sure that a lot of us who have dug into the WikiLeaks emails and really dug into to the Stars Academy in general all think the same thing. Right, just something's a little off there.
Something's off, and we will get there, because I think that's kind of where we're at. Like, to the stars kind of came and then went, and now we're kind of left like wondering, what do we do now? And I think the fact that we're having this discussion today about a general who may not have even have been involved in this, except for rumor and speculation, and we don't even know if this is the actual dude that Tom talk to. He says it is, but we'll get to that. But Tim, how about you, my man? When Tom DeLonge first came forward and all this happened, and then boom, New York Times article. What do you got? What were your initial impressions?
Well, yeah, I was kind of late to the party. Not as late as Britt there, but I didn't pay any attention. I wasn't a part of the UFO community or really paying attention to the topic in general until late December 2017, when the New York Times came out. These videos started coming out, and so I kind of had to backtrack and listen. I think the first thing I thought when I watched that initial press conference that was held back in October was that it was so freaking weird that they were clearly in an empty auditorium. I couldn't figure out why the hell they would do that. It was so strange, especially for what they were saying they were going to do. But I think, like anybody else, I guess for me, not coming from a UFO background per se, it was strange to see people. Some of the people up there on the stage that I was at least vaguely familiar with. People that do have credentialed backgrounds, like Christopher Mellon, Steve Justice, working at Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin, Jim Semivan. And so it was just odd. It's an odd mix to be there. And I guess I didn't, I guess because I didn't get to hear the news when it first came out in October, I probably didn't have the same response as a lot of people who it maybe wasn't as odd because I at least had the benefit of seeing them actually do something in terms of releasing information and being the ones to kind of break the news on ATIP and OSAP and all of that. So, like Britt said, I guess in retrospect, it's weird and it's still weird, but it's an interesting topic. Maybe it's weird because it's a mix of weird but people that aren't weird. It's a really weird confluence. It's the strangest lunch table in the cafeteria.
It is the ultimate breakfast club, Tim. I think for sure.
Right.
I remember. So I don't remember. I think it was 2012. I was at the International UFO Congress in Arizona, and I'm sitting at a banquet table. We're having like this dinner, and I look up, and in the corner is this tall, lanky dude just standing there, like scoping out the room and listening to what was going on. And lo and behold, it was Tom DeLonge. So I mean, there you go, man. Like, this guy, he's no slouch. He didn't just get into this. He's had a fascination and interest for years now, ever since he was on the tour buses and stuff with Blink. But he somehow wiggled his way into whatever it is that he came up with To the Stars. And again, I think a lot of us thought, oh man, like this is all BS, like this is gonna blow up in his face. And then, like Britt mentioned, the Podesta emails were leaked. And I'm just gonna read right here the email that really caught all of our attention. This was from Tom DeLonge to John Podesta. The subject was General McCasland. There you go. The subject was literally General McCasland. And Tom is saying to Podesta, he mentioned he's a skeptic. He's not. I've been working with him for 4 months. I just got done giving him a 4-hour presentation on the entire project a few weeks ago. Trust me, the advice is already been has already been happening on how to do all of this. He just has to say that out loud. But he is very, very aware. And he was in charge of all of this stuff. When Roswell crashed, it's an interesting way of wording it. When Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which we will get to. General McCasland was in charge of that exact laboratory up to a couple years ago. He not only knows what I'm trying to achieve, he helped assemble my advisory team. He's a very important man. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say other than General McCasland must be this individual. What do you guys think?
Right. I think we should provide a little bit of background, though,
Please,
as
Zach,
to
yeah.
why we think that general is okay. So first of all, Tom DeLonge was going around in 2016 giving various interviews, and he was talking about and recalling this story of this guy that he called the General. Okay. there's a lot to this, but I'm going to be as brief as possible because there's just too much to get into. Basically, he had this, you recalled this story, he had this airport meeting. He had climbed the hierarchy of secrecy or whatever, and he has this airport meeting with this general, just the general. And the general says, we found a life form, and it was the Cold War, and basically gives him, feeds Tom this whole story, a new kind of core story of UFO mythology, I guess, right? And it kind of sounds a lot like other core mythologies that we've heard in the past for this topic. And the reason why I think that when Tom is referencing McCasland in that email, why I think the general that he was talking about publicly and the General McCasland that he's talking about privately, why I think they almost have to be the same guy is because he's talking about the exact same things, like, oh, this guy who ran research at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same base where they shipped the Roswell crash or whatever. It has to be the same guy because the language is just too similar between his public interviews and what he's privately saying to John Podesta. So that's my impression of it.
Right. And I mean, again, I think when looking at the background of McCasland is when it really starts to fall into place. I mean, like you said, he worked at Wright-Patterson. He worked at Los Angeles Air Force Base early on in his career. I talked to Don Schmidt this morning. For any of our listeners who don't know, he's one of the most prominent Roswell investigators out there. He's been looking at the case for a while. And I just out of the blue, I messaged him. I'm like, hey man, in all of your research into Wright-Patterson and Roswell, has General McCasland ever come up? And he messaged me back immediately. He was like, yeah, funny you should mention that. Here's exactly what he said. I met McCasland at a luncheon at the Petroleum Club in New Mexico, but didn't know his connections to Wright-Patterson at the time. Once I got to really know more about him and what he was involved in, I reached out to him personally to talk about the Roswell crash and possible wreckage, and he refused to comment on anything to me. So, interesting. It doesn't really add to the story other than the primary, person looking at Roswell was kind of brushed off by McCasland. And I will say, I did reach out to General McCasland in a very public sort of way recently. No backdoor meetings or communication, but he did read my message. I know that for a fact. So, as of the recording of this, he has not answered me back, but we will see. But I guess, Britt, now McCasland is something you've been looking a lot into lately, and you've been digging and making some connections. So what do you think is most important about this guy and why we should continue looking at him as possibly the person who set all of this into motion with Tom, the people he's working with? Yeah, what do you think?
But yeah, it's just his background in aerospace technology, right? He's got a very prestigious background. It's very impressive. And, you can hear rumors, just people in general just like to pass around the rumor about Wright-Patterson being the base where they have all the cool stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To ET and UFOs. But, another interesting thing about him is that he worked in the Kirtland research facility.
Right.
It's just, he has a lot of interesting connections in general to things that are kind of rumored to be associated with this, just this whole entire phenomenon in general, right?
Are you familiar? Sorry, Britt. I just want to ask: are you familiar with the Kirtland mythology when it comes to UFOs? Is that something you've looked into yet, or no?
I am currently looking into it.
Okay.
I know that their focal point is just basically all missile related research in space vehicles, propulsion, stuff like that. But the mythology behind it, I know it exists. I mean, I've heard you talk about it, but I haven't personally looked into it just yet because, there's just an endless array of rabbit holes to fall into while we're researching this phenomenon. And I can honestly say, genuinely say, I have not covered all of it just yet. I'm only just at the tip of the iceberg right now. But McCasland in general was just the most interesting to me, right? So I'm just steadily digging, steadily digging.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, what do you make of this guy? Now, I know you've spoken to a lot of people, including in your 3-part series recently over at the Debrief. Like, you know how these people react when it comes to UFOs, and it's not something they ever want to touch. And it seems like this guy was willing to really cooperate with Tom, even when UFOs came up. So, like, what do you think, man? Is this something that they saw an opportunity to work with this guy and just play him? Or, what do you make of the whole McCasland thing? If you even think this is the dude that set this stuff all up.
Well, I mean, we're down to the core. We're getting right to the heart of the real deal here.
Absolutely.
Way to just dig right into it.
We're going right to the end of the movie. Yep.
All right, man. Cool. I think, I think it's an interesting, the whole kind of it adds, like Zac said, it adds some really interesting mythology to it. Now, one problem that I have with the whole McCasland story has nothing to do with what we just discussed and publicly out there, but it's just based on the simple fact that everything that we know and all inferences that we have to kind of make are based solely on just a single source, in this case, Tom DeLonge. And I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit, but there's been some comments by Tom in different interviews at various points where it's called to question the veracity of some of what he's saying. Down to the fact that one could even question whether or not what explicitly Tom was saying in those emails to Podesta was accurate. So that's what makes it really difficult for me. And I don't think I dispute. I think that it's. I would say with a high degree of certainty that McCasland is probably the quote general that DeLonge has referenced in numerous occasions. Now, beyond that, in terms of, it was the Cold War, we found a life form. I mean, that sounds like a great hook for a book or a movie. Or even the information where he's saying he's been helping me build my team out, this type of stuff. Like you mentioned, I've had an opportunity, been fortunate to speak to a lot of people who have either worked on these kind of UFO programs in more contemporaneous, more current, I should say, time frames, or even in the recent past, going back to OSAP. No one has shared that same sentiment with me, that McCasland is like the smoking man from X-Files behind this. All of that said, I think that it's totally understandable why McCasland would come up. I think that, if you were going to write a script for it in the mythology, McCasland's a great character to cast. I think Britt touched on it. His assignments, not just his career and specifically what he's done during his Air Force career, is he had a number of posts and assignments where, if there is more UFO involvement in the U.S. government than they let on, he certainly would be in a position to kind of know that. Going down to his initial assignments right out of college when he was first commissioned in the Air Force down at Los Angeles Air Force Base. In the early '80s, he would have been working on the Star Wars program. So a lot of satellite, a lot of missile defense stuff, a lot of monitoring. It's a very, very tense time frame there. And so, I think we mentioned this off the mic when we were chatting about it, but one intriguing thing, and this just kind of comes from me, a background in law enforcement. One of those roles was as a profiler. And so you start looking to see, does behavior match what's being said? And it's interesting to me that the quote about it was the Cold War, the threat of nuclear war was every day around us. That's actually, consistent with what somebody in McCasland's position during the early 1980s would say, frankly, because it was a very tense time. It was, arguably one of the most tense times next to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Mm-hmm. And so I think that him being assigned there initially, there's enough reconnaissance and surveillance and intelligence assets that are in satellite space and in atmosphere space, if you've got stuff coming through and you're picking it up, obviously there's going to be a conversation had. Later in his career, he worked a lot of acquisitions and materials command related stuff, both at the Pentagon and then there at Air Force Research Labs. That's specifically where he worked at Wright-Patterson in the materials division. And so, sure, Wright-Pat has considerable history in the Roswell myths and the UFO myths, and his specific command position would have been inside the materials doctrine. And so he's definitely kind of in all these right positions, but is what he said accurate? I don't know. And that's what makes it difficult, is because we only have one side of the story. And more than that, we don't even have a direct side of the story. So we have Tom, who's made either general inferences about, quote, the general, or we're reading an email that, let's all be honest, was not meant for public consumption anyway. It was sent to the recipient. And so, it's like, if anybody combed through our emails, I bet you they could get all sorts of impressions that probably aren't accurate. If you comb through somebody's text messages, because conversations go on the phone, they go on in person. So we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns there, and so it's difficult for me.
Right, Zach. Well, that brings up something that Zach has brought up in his looking into all of this is Tom DeLonge and his admitting that he might have made some stuff up to get higher and higher up the food chain.
Somehow you were able to not only get people on the phone, but get people on the record and start really getting stuff out to the public that had never been available before. And is that just due to your sheer tenacity?
It really kind of was. I basically, the very beginning of it, I was playing a lot of very important people off each other. It was really kind of funny. I was just making things up. I was like, hey, I'm talking to so-and-so. And I go to that guy. I'm like, hey, I'm talking to so-and-so.
And you weren't talking to anybody?
Oh, I kind of was, but it was more like handshakes and hellos,
Zach, do you want to comment on that and kind of how it plays into what Tim's saying there? That we've got this one dude to trust when it comes to all this, and he's the lead singer of Blink-182, so take that for what it is.
Yeah, there's so much here to sort of. It's a puzzle, right? And it's like you're just trying to wrap your head around all these various pieces, and we don't have the full context. So you've got to kind of infer certain things. Right. And I don't like to infer things. I like to look at what can we prove here? So what I can prove is Tom DeLonge went on the radio on KROQ radio, and said that he was essentially playing people off each other early on. These are his words. He said, I was playing people off each other. In some cases, he only, it was like handshakes and hellos is the way he described it, So he took these handshakes and hellos and then went to other people and said, who knows, right? And we have to guess based on, that, was he doing the same thing here with Podesta and McCasland, right? We don't know what Tom was saying directly to McCasland. We only know what Tom was saying about McCasland to Podesta, which is why it would be really great for McCasland to come out and kind of clear this up. And the argument that I've been railing on and making for a long time is this is something that really adds credibility to Tom's story for people that are just looking at this and just kind of skimming the surface of things. It's like, well, look at this. Tom talked to General McCasland. Look, he had a Google Hangouts meeting with him. He had a Google Hangouts meeting with freaking McCasland, Robert Weiss from Skunkworks.
Skunkworks, right?
Yeah, someone from the Hillary Clinton campaign, who I won't name here because doesn't matter. But a group of people were part of this Google Hangouts meeting, and what the hell were they doing there? And Tom follows up that Google Hangouts meeting, writing another email to Podesta saying, this General McCasland, he says he's a skeptic. Trust me, he's not, and again, that sounds a lot very consistent with what Tom said on KROQ about playing people off each other, or it's hard to establish a timeline. It's Tom, was this an instance of you playing people off each other, or were you actually in communication with this general who fed you this story? It's very difficult to get a handle on all this, but the reason why I think it's important is I look at basic questions that you ask going into anything. and you look at important details. It's like, okay, Tom was certainly, in communication with these people. Let's go find out. Let's go talk to McCasland, right?
Mhm.
And look, I've tried. I have done everything within my power as a not journalist and not huge, person. I've done everything I can to try to get something out of McCasland, because my view is it's like either Tom's story is true, and that would be interesting. Maybe we get like a no comment out of McCasland. He just says nothing. Or alternatively, everything here that Tom said in these emails is horseshit. And McCasland is hiding from the whole thing and not wanting to say anything because honestly, he doesn't want his name any more tarnished than it already is by his attachment to this entire story. Either way, this is an important piece of the puzzle to, we need to know one way or the other. And my argument to McCasland, if he's out there somewhere listening, it's like, dude, I'm not the only one who's going to ask this question. I'm not the only person who's going to send you messages on Facebook, right? And in fact, I would argue even after he passes away, people are going to keep this is how UFO mythology works. This stuff sticks forever. It's like if you have something to say about this, it would be really good for you to come out and say something about it, because it is a loose hanging fact, right? That is just kind of hanging out there, and it will just become part and incorporated with the larger UFO mythology unless it does get cleared up. So I would hope that journalists will, reach out to McCasland, and I would hope that McCasland understands why it's important for him to say something one way or the other about this.
You bring up so many good points, Zach, especially the fact that you're right, in ufology, you will become like a myth when it comes to this. So it's like, if you really want to be known as the general who possibly, was feeding Tom DeLonge a bunch of either bullshit or truth, be it.
If that wasn't true, I would want to disentangle that for people, especially. So, and I really want to, not to interrupt, but I really want to explain why I think it's important. If I'm McCasland and I see the last 4 years play out, starting with To the Stars Academy, to the New York Times article, to the classified UAP briefings, to now the Pentagon has literally released a report on UFOs. This is important because it all started effectively with Tom DeLonge and the formation of To the Stars Academy and that core group of people that were part of To the Stars Academy, right? We've still got Mellon and Elizondo and all these other people kind of in play, continuing to talk about this. So when I look at journalists kind of looking into this stuff, I am a bit critical, because it's like no one is circling back and going, okay, where did this start? And can we trust any of this? Because I see a scenario that could be multiple things. One of the hypotheses I have, among many, I personally think there's something to this. But another hypothesis might be these are all people kind of chasing their own shadows, you hear something from one person and you think it's good enough to follow up with action, say. There's a lot of stuff here and none of it's verifiable. None of it. And I'm just like, can we verify something? And the McCasland thing is okay, well, here's the origin of To the Stars Academy. Tom said that this guy helped him assemble his advisory team. Is that true? It's question 1 on the list, right? I've got a long list of questions, but this is the first one, and somehow it's gone unaddressed for 4 freaking years. Anyway, that's why I care.
What'd you say, Britt?
Yeah, it's technically longer. It's because I think those emails leaked November.
Yeah, 5 years.
Well, October and November 2016. So it's 5 years.
That brings up something really interesting too. We have to go back to and I'm so glad you used Chasing Shadows, Zach. Obviously being the first book in this series that Tom sort of pitched to all these people.
Drop there, yeah.
Yeah, good job, my man. You know what you're doing. But we don't even know, because we know Tom originally kind of compiled this advisory board with this possible general, and then the emails leaked, and a lot of them got cold feet and were like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm out. Like, my name, I'm done.
Yeah.
So, like, that's another big question too. So is McMillan, is Elizondo, are these people that he did eventually work with into the stars the actual people that the original general assembled? We don't even know that at this point, unless I'm completely off base with that. I don't know, but it seems like a lot of this really started with secret machines, which I think kind of took the back seat when all of this other stuff started happening with the Navy UFO videos and everything. It's kind of like his original pitch kind of went to the the back burner for a little bit, and now look at where we are. Less than 2 years after To the Stars started, it's already basically gone. So, yeah, I don't know. Is that something anyone else wants to comment on? But we don't even know if this was the original people that Tom was talking to that eventually ended up in the academy.
No, you're right. There's a ton of unknowns there, and I'll share because I have followed up some on it, and I think Zach brings up a very extremely significant point: is understanding the origin of it. Because it becomes problematic. If you don't look into that, and it requires you to just take the word of Tom DeLonge. That also requires you to begin digging into other things that he said, and frankly, Tom said a lot of crazy shit. If anybody's watched the Joe Rogan interview, anything like that, and so you have to start saying, well, is that true? Is this true? So trying to sift through all of that is a difficult venture, and especially when you've got this other real thing that the government's talking about, they're releasing reports about, but then you've got all this other stuff mixed in. But I did dig into it some, and I will say that only in background conversations, nobody wanted to speak on the record for various reasons, and one of them oftentimes being because anybody who's actively employed by the Department of Defense, whether they're active duty military or civilian, they can't. They're not supposed to talk to reporters.
Yeah.
They get a lot of trouble. But no one shared. No one has ever corroborated Tom's story to me. No one has ever, made it sound like he's made it sound. It has been told to me that Tom, is very much Tom-like in that, there's no secret sauce to how I get a hold of people. It's just like what Tom did, which is reaching out to people. If you ask enough people, somebody says yes, and you just kind of work your way there. And I think that to some extent, I'll say, just now playing devil's advocate here and speaking on his benefit, that it wasn't as nefarious as it might have sounded in the interview where he said he was playing people off of each other. That's what journalists do. Is if you can get, if you can email somebody and say, hey, I've been chatting with John Podesta, and so I was wondering if I can chat with you, this type of thing, because it's nobody wants to be the first person to talk to the press, but they don't mind if others have. And so that it could be just simply that. Just about all journalists do that. But everybody has kind of shared it that Tom was just really good at reaching out to lots of people. He is, even though Britt, what do you say, a child of the 2000s? I feel very old right now because I grew up with.
Well, I'm technically a 90s kid, but I was a teenager, and then
she's right on the cusp. Yeah, I feel you, Britt. Yeah.
All right, well, fine. Well, I can still remember being in high school jamming out to Blink, and
dude,
so
me too, Tim. Yeah. I'm with you.
Tom's got a name out there, so it's not just a random person, and so he reaches out. It was shared to me that at least initially, a lot of people, hey, it's Tom DeLonge. I know this dude, and that this was a project very much like you said, that the impetus behind it was the secret machines. It was this intermixing of fiction, nonfiction, like I'm going to tell a story, what's supposed to be the truth through fiction format. And so a lot of these people who initially spoke to Tom were under this impression that they were just giving advice for a fictional movie or book.
Right.
Which afforded them the ability to use fictional stuff. and that's not to say that Tom is overtly lying to anybody. That's what, I end up saying this a lot to people, is that the truth tends to be very mundane, and it's not nearly as sophisticated, and there's not this grand scheme that often people think. Is that, Tom very well could have gone into some of these meetings saying, hey, I want to write this book and make it really realistic, and it's about UFOs and everything. And can you give me some advice and pointers? Wink, wink. And he's thinking, well, what they're telling me, they're saying it's for the book, but they're just saying that because they can't really, break security oaths. Wink, wink. Meanwhile, they're on the other side going, oh, why does this dude keep winking at me? Like, maybe, he was a punk rocker,
Yeah.
lived a rocker lifestyle. And so, that's kind of the way that everybody that I've spoken to about it has said it. But like Zac says, until somebody's willing to go on the record for it, this is just me telling you what somebody's told me. Whether anybody wants to do that or not, fine. I don't expect anybody to. And I agree that kind of some clarity here would be good. I understand, at least initially, some of the people I spoke to, this was when TTSA was more together, and you had McMillan and Steve Justice and Elizondo there, so maybe they didn't want to shit on those people's new employer, but that's kind of dissolved. And so I think either just getting some truth there, and I think because that's what becomes very frustrating with all of this, is that you have something that I think is legitimately interesting here. When the government's releasing reports saying that, 144 incidences, I don't really give a shit if it's only one of those instances that's got something really exotic. Like, that's enough for me. I know people want to argue on Twitter about, whether the 2019 events were drones or UFOs. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I only need one. If one of them is interesting, it's worthwhile of scrutiny. And so when you've got 144 of them, and then they're mentioning, a handful that have very interesting characteristics, I'm like, that's really fascinating. But it's hard to dig into just that and get everybody to kind of focus on that, because there's all these other little pig trails that go down there. And so it would be very nice to get clarity, whether it's McCasland, whether it's TGSA, whether it's DeLonge, so we can just sweep that to the side. No hard feelings. Like, I'm not mad if it's all a big misunderstanding, but let's kind of get through that, because if not, even if it's just that one interesting something, it gets lost in the mix. And I think that's happened for decades.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead,
and
Britt.
another thing too is like, so McCasland would say it's like a fiction book, right, that he was working with, but there's some conflictions there, right? Assuming that he is talking about McCasland in this particular email to Podesta, it's the title of the email is Podesta and UFOs, right? And part of this email, he says, because of his maturity on the topic, he has consistently given important information to help communicate. He helped me create my thesis, 3 Secret Machines non-fiction books coming out after the novel. And that the thesis is what gained my friendship with the very important general from Wright-Patterson that was on our call. So, I can't help but to assume, like Zac said earlier, there's just the language there, right? It causes you to just assume that he is talking about McCasland, right? So, that part right there, right? That's what we really need, like, transparency and clarification. Like, I understand, like, it kind of sucks to get your name out there to the public because some Russian hacker group decided to hack John Podesta, and this famous rock star just kept name dropping you, or just like put you in there. Like, I get it, right? Like, I would do the same position too. Like, I don't want to go out. I had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But
thank you, Assange.
Like, especially with this topic going on the news, it's becoming a thing. Congress is talking about it. Obviously it's a big deal. So, you're going to have people, especially people like us who like to dig really deep, just be like, what is this? And like, I really wish it would just come out and clear this a little bit.
I think we're all on the same page that, like, just one comment from McCasland would be enough to kind of put a lot of this, I guess, speculation to rest. But the big frustrating thing for me, and this is since the beginning of when he did all this, was the whole approach of half fiction, half truth. Because God damn, welcome to ufology. That's all we deal with is two lies between a truth. And the minute he said that, I was like, we're never going to know what's true and what's not. And Tom was like, UFO people, read between the lines.
yeah,
I
like,
know you guys, read between the lines.
My whole plan here is to do, like, professionally exactly what has already been done for 70 years by everybody.
Right. Which is tough. But, and I think, the important thing, and I think Tim stressed it most, is that Tom is not, he's a smart person. And you're right. I think the way that he worked these people isn't so much deceptive, but it's what someone would do. And it's what they do for a living, a lot of these people. I mean, Elizondo's a nice guy, but you can't tell me that he has not spun things. He has not manipulated things. That was his job. So I think it's really interesting. Tom, like, he went into the Lion's Den and he played their game. And, like, whether you like it or not, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, where we stand with everything today. But Zach, what were you going to say, man?
Well, the cojones on Tom. So, like, full credit to Tom, regardless whether this is true or bullshit or whatever. The fact that he went in and did the things that he did, let's say for the sake of argument that it's true, like he was just playing people off each other. Cool. Like, honestly, it detracts really from the story for me. It actually makes it even more funny or interesting or whatever. Because here's the thing. Regardless whether or not this General McCasland actually, like, sincerely believed the things that he supposedly told Tom, or if that was BS, like, it doesn't really matter. Here we are several years later, and the government has now issued a report on UAP. And anybody who's been following this for the last, 4 or 5 years, it's like you can draw a straight line between TTSA and all the stuff that Tom DeLonge was doing early on to now. The people who are involved in literally lobbying the government are all the same people. Kudos to you, Tom. Like, my thing is, I just want to disentangle the complete crap from what's really interesting here, because it's important if the government found a life form during the Cold War or not, right? And the only person who can clarify this at this point, and if Tom made that up or whatever, like, I feel for you, McCasland. I wouldn't want to come forward either. But man, like, given the severity of the issue and the gravity of what's currently playing out in the media, now would be a good time, is kind of the argument that I would make. And again, it's like, you don't want to comment on this. You don't want to tarnish your name or whatever.
Only once.
Yeah.
You'll be done.
Yeah. I see no downside to him coming out at this point, other than, like, fear of embarrassing Tom. Like, okay.
Yeah, maybe they are besties now. We don't really know. But, like,
right?
Zach, you're so right. And, like, Britt, you came around when, like, with the 60 Minutes stuff and, like, even the report just coming out, and the primary focus being to shed the stigma and ridicule of military personnel reporting UAP events. And, like, that's a huge admission and a huge switch from what they have done in the past. So, like, that's awesome. And you would hope that something like that would make people like McCasland be like, maybe it's okay that I, like, say that I put Tom in touch with people. And
hey, Tom, everything Tom said, it could be true.
Yeah.
These are emails that, like, nobody wanted coming out, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to infer. I have to make guesses here. And this is the thing. And why I would like McCasland to talk. It's like, I don't want to guess. If there's, either come out with a no comment, if there's some truth to it, or come out with a comment saying, hey, Tom reached out for a fictional UFO book, and we were just chatting back and forth, and he's Tom freaking DeLonge. Of course I talked to him. Like, like, I don't care. Either one of those is cool with me. My point is, like, again, I like to go into the origins of things and understand things as best as I can. And when something sticks out like a sore thumb, like this McCasland thing, again, that adds all this credibility for people to the whole story. It's like, we really got to work this out, because regardless whether it's BS or not, we still have Elizondo, we still have Mellon, we still have these people going around in the media. We still have them lobbying government, and actual, at least two that I'm aware of, classified UAP briefings that were given to senators. On top of, and then on top of that, it's like we got this report, 90 pages of which are classified. This actually all has happened because of these people. So, but it's important to establish these facts about what happened early on, I think, in order to be able to disentangle the rest of the story, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, man. Sure. Well, and I think that brings us to current day, which is two follow-up questions I want to ask you guys. Is Tom has been kind of quiet about everything going on right now with the UAP report and this and that, and you would think he would be like kind of taking credit for like, I know he's put some tweets out like this was because of To the Stars, this, that. But he seems to have been unusually quiet with that. Maybe it's because he's focusing on the entertainment side of things with his band and his movies. But my question for you is, do you guys think, and maybe this is going out on a limb, do you think the plan all along was like to get Tom to do this stuff and then for it to all dissolve? Like, you see, you got Steve Justice went and is now working for Virgin Galactic. You got Elizondo starting a startup company. Like, they all kind of came in, did their thing, and now they're all leaving. And kind of leaving Tom in the dust alone with all this. So, like, do you think this was some sort of concerted effort to, like, dissolve this company that he had these big grand plans for all along? Or am I going really out on a conspiracy limb with that?
I don't think so.
Be honest.
Well, I think
it's
that
to consider every avenue, like you got to consider it. So I don't think
it just seems odd to me that they would all just leave this company that they seem to be so dedicated to at the beginning. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's weird, but it doesn't have to be as conspiratorial or kind of, again, nefarious as it sounds. I think that if, let's say you're Louis Elizondo, you're Chris Mellon, you're Steve Justice and the rest of them, and you legitimately believe that there are to this UFO subject, you recognize that there's evidence that maybe hasn't been presented, and you feel like it needs to be taken seriously. I think, and Zach's right in terms of, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm bashing DeLonge by any means when I said that he said some crazy shit. Hopefully he'd agree with me. But he is a very successful businessman, and he's very successful. And I think that when it comes down to how he was successful in kind of getting to meet these people, it shows his savvy in business, and it shows that he's been successful not just in the band that he helped form with Blink-182, but after that, his career, his other ventures. He's successful. But one thing he is he's loud, and he draws a lot of attention. And there's something to be said about the crazy shit he says. What other interviews did Joe Rogan do in November of 2017? I don't know. I know he interviewed Tom DeLonge because of what he said. And so it generates a significant amount of attention. However, once you get that attention, if you're going to bring it into the realm of legitimacy, and you're having actual briefings with elected lawmakers, and you're sitting in front of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense and these people, suddenly, the guy who's the leader of the company tweeting about alien Antarctic bases and Nazi conspiracies, that's not really conducive. That's not going to, no longer is it good. You've gotten that attention. So I don't think it has to be kind of a grand crazy conspiracy. I know a lot of people think that this is, and some of those theories, quite frankly, have been, helped fostered by DeLonge himself. That there's more of a, government organized kind of involvement in this, and the bringing about a disclosure with a capital D. But I don't think it has to be that per se in an organized government fashion. I think if you're savvy and you know how to strategize things well, which I don't think anybody would argue that somebody like Chris Mellon is very good at. And so I don't think Tom, for a long time, I was like a lot of people, like, what the hell are these people doing with Tom DeLonge? But it generated a ton of attention. And I'm not so sure that that same type of attention could have been achieved by any one of those individuals without Tom.
Oh, that's such a good point, Tim. The fact that we are where we are today, like we got an official Pentagon report. Maybe it wasn't what we all wanted or expected, but like this all built up to something that I don't think even Tom DeLonge saw happening. He probably thought that a lot of this was going to happen with his company, and like he was going to build a spaceship, an anti-gravitic spaceship, and fly off to Mars. Like, mission accomplished, man. That's freaking awesome. But like, look at where we are today. And like, I do, and I've wanted to say this for a really long time, and I haven't just come out and said it, but like, thank you, Tom DeLonge. Like, literally, just thank you for what you did, and like, kind of putting it all out there. And he had a lot to lose with this, with his reputation and whatnot. And say what you want about where he is now and everything, but like, he really got a lot of this into motion. And you know, maybe McCasland as well, but I don't know. Maybe that's just the fanboy coming out in me. I don't know.
How much have you had to drink, Ryan? Man, you're
This
getting
is
all
only-
emotional. I love you, Tom. Man, I
Only my
swear to God,
second.
man.
Welcome to Tom DeLonge fanboy hour.
No, dude, I like it. If I was McCasland, and if you're listening out there, General, just respond to Zach. All you have to do
Yes,
is
please.
say, one line. It was the Cold War, and we found a life form. Period. Send. And that like never answer another one. Like, how awesome would that be?
Oh my God! If anyone could get it out of him, I think it would be Zach for sure.
Dude,
I sent him a very long, heartfelt message on Facebook. You know, just letting him know, like, look, this stuff's really important to me. Here's why. And you know, for him, I don't think it is that big of a deal, to be honest. I think
I agree.
yeah. I think that probably for him, he's probably like, I don't think a lot about this, and like, I'd rather just get away from it. This is a total guess on my part, but I still think it's important because, again, this is my wannabe journalist coming out, I guess. Just establish the basic facts here, and there's a lot of other really interesting things about those emails that we haven't really even gotten into.
Oh yeah, do you mind? Yeah,
well,
give us a couple key points.
Look, Hillary Clinton is the one who introduced us to the term UAP. Now, that's not the first time the term was used, but it was certainly the first time that the American public, it was put in the zeitgeist of the American public, was she said it on Jimmy Kimmel's show. Well, who was the advisor to Hillary Clinton? It was John Podesta. Who was Tom talking to? John Podesta. There's a lot of stuff here, right? And Hillary, by the way, was talking about this issue not just like once, but like 5 or 6 times, where she brought up UFOs and the UAP issue and talking about, we're going to get the files. She said the same thing that her husband said, right? And was she doing that to get votes? Doesn't seem like a great, I don't know. I don't know what the calculus is on that. Is the UFO vote huge? I doubt it. I bet it's like actually the other way. But right. And so it's interesting to me just looking at the people who were involved. John Podesta. There were a couple other people involved with the Hillary Clinton campaign that Tom was emailing with. And, the insinuation has been from that whole group of people that like Hillary was going to be the disclosure president. She was going to be the one to do this. And nobody thought that it was even remotely possible that Trump could win, right? We're not going to get political, but like nobody thought it was these people did not think it was possible. They thought Hillary was going to be the one, and a bunch of people surrounding her were UFO believers. Okay? These are high-level people in government.
Right.
It's interesting.
Well, Zach,
I have to make note of it.
That's such a good point. And I think, Tim, it might have actually been you that I heard maybe on Micah Hanks' show, or something similar, saying where we would be in all of this had Hillary become president and not Trump. And Tim, was it you that said like we would probably be a lot further had Hillary won than I don't know. Am I
It
wrong on
wasn't.
that?
Yeah, it wasn't me. And
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I will.
Maybe it
Go
was
home,
Steve
Ryan. You're
Jackson.
drunk.
See.
I'm drunk.
Thanks for confusing me with Steve.
I
Jackson.
know. I'm so
Uh,
sorry, man. What
I'm leaving now. No, I'm just kidding, Steve. If you're listening,
Ryan's getting
I'll
rambunctious. Yeah.
I'll bring a new wrinkle up into all of that,
Ooh.
though, because I don't think it's been discussed by anybody. But I think
Yeah.
it goes into what Zach's saying here.
Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here. When I'm not making podcasts, I am listening to them. Seriously, I'm obsessed. And if there's one person and one show I turn to every week to hear stories of the strange, the weird, and the unexplained, it's of course gotta be Jim Harold's Campfire. With over 500 episodes, Den of Geek called Jim Harold's Campfire the best tool we have currently in existence to hear real-life scary stories from other human beings since the actual campfire was invented. The concept is pretty simple. Jim talks to other regular folks and strange stuff that's happened to them. And yes, that includes UFOs and UAPs, along with cryptids, ghosts, and true head-scratching mysteries. One of my all-time favorite stories is one where a woman almost ended up being absorbed by a painting in a mysterious bar that seemed like something straight out of the Twilight Zone. Or there's the story of a young man who encountered a spider-like creature with baby hands. Then there's the story of a woman in England who encountered what she thought was a banshee, only to suffer a horrible tragedy only moments later. Now, not all of the stories in Jim Harold's Campfire are horrifying. Some are actually pretty heartwarming, like a visit from a past loved one, or a peaceful near-death experience. Regardless, there are true and fascinating stories told by ordinary people who've had extraordinary experiences. So, pull up a virtual log, get cozy, and tune in to Jim Harold's Campfire. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to Somewhere in the Skies.
First and foremost, where did those where did those WikiLeaks emails come from? We know that they came from Fancy Bear, which is GRU and the Russia's hacker group. Okay, so they hacked those emails in early 2016. They didn't publish them on WikiLeaks until what was it, the fall of 16? 17?
Yeah, right before the election. Yeah.
Right before,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Like days or not even hours, I think. Yeah.
right. All
They knew
good.
what they were doing.
All good, yeah, information warfare strategy, but they had those early on. And if you go back and look at early on, shortly after they obtained those emails, look into Russia's English language news outlets, so RT and Sputnik, they started pumping UFO tabloid news into English reading markets. They were dumping it hardcore. In fact, you can even find one foreign policy journalist commenting early summer 2016 saying, what the hell is going on with Russia and UFOs? They've become obsessed and they're dumping it on the American public. So they knew it was going to be something, which is very intriguing to all of it. And I think the other side of all of that as well is, and what comes into not just McCasland clarifying some things, but also Podesta, Tom DeLonge, and a lot of other people, is that one thing that plays through my mind is that part of how Russia's information warfare campaigns go through is they're masters at adding things in. They did it when the Snowden leaks. When you see the Snowden leaks, everything in the entire Snowden leaks was capabilities. What the NSA can do, all these hacking capabilities. Only one single file showed operations, and that was them listening in and spying on German Chancellor Angela Merkel. That was the only operational file in there, and so that it's never been confirmed, but that's been reported that Russia just added that in. Now, that was probably a legitimate intelligence intercept on their part, but they're notorious for adding things in, and including adding total bullshit in. They did it, the KGB was masters at this, where they would actually get legitimate classified information, cables and different things from the US, and then they would just add little things in amongst actual classified information. That they did it in the mid to late 80s with information saying that the United States had nukes hidden in different cities across the world and all this kind of stuff. Total bullshit, but everything around it was legitimate secrets. Well, the government, because they know, I mean, it's a great info warfare play because the government's not going to comment on anything. They've never commented on the Snowden leaks. They don't comment on anything like that. So they're not going to say, hey, that's BS, because that'll say everything else is legitimate.
Right.
So they can deny talking about everything. And so that adds to the kind of mystique and intrigue here, and that what I mentioned with that single source that we just have Tom talking on behalf of conversations that he have with it is, I think, like Zac said, for me, it's not just establishing what were those communications, but are all of these communications legitimate? Because we have to understand where that information came from, and it did absolutely come from Russian hackers. Absolutely came from an information warfare campaign.
I'm so happy you brought that up, man. Like, look at what just the debrief just released too. It was all these like kind of satirical things about the US being like, calm down about the UFOs, guys. That's so telling, man. It's like this is all a counterintelligence sort of game. I think China's playing right now, Russia, and like who's really at the top of all this stuff going on in the US? I don't know.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and that's something that I'm actually working on the next big piece. Gosh, let's hope the Kremlin isn't listening, but it has to do with that, and it has to do with Russia's involvement in the UFO subject that they don't want to talk about, that they do want to talk about. And, I'm not trying to, like Zac said, we're not going to get political here. So I don't want everybody to go, oh, it's the goddamn Russian hoax again. So I'm not blaming the Russians for everything here. And more importantly, I'm blaming the Kremlin, not the Russian people. They're great people. It's their government that's mean. But I would say that there's significant evidence that Russia has been involved in some of the UFO mythology that we take as self-evident fact going back to the 1980s. And so there goes, not to add a new wrinkle into everything that you've got to parse through to figure out what is true and what isn't, but how many UFO myths that we have accepted as fact now, or we've played off as being illegitimate, but they're hoaxes perpetrated by people we assume, or were they just legitimate information operations done by a foreign government? And I think that's a very significant point because, again, it's, give the devil their due. It's hands off at smart credit. If I make you believe that there's crashed UFOs at Air Material Command at Army Air Force Research Labs at Wright-Patterson, and you track down all of these people and you keep talking about it and you keep putting it out by UFOs, I may not even believe you're going to get UFOs, but damn, if you can get some good actual secrets, if somebody, I'm not working on UFOs, I'm working on directed energy. Oh, Sergey, you hear that? It's good work on their part. And so,
Tim, it turns out I am actually Russian the whole time.
Dude, that's a great accent. Yeah, I'm probably going to get the microwave beam. Yeah, I'm going to get the microwave.
It is me, Vasya.
The Havana syndrome's coming right here. Shit.
Zac, you got a good Russian accent there, man. I believed it the whole time.
Yeah,
really good.
I work with many Russian people in past. It's okay.
Yeah, it's an excellent one. It's an excellent one. And I want to make sure that everybody knows I'm not trying to make Russia the boogeyman here, but I do think there are, down to the fact that, one of RT's darlings is Stephen Greer, because why the hell not? He's like a propaganda gift from God.
I'm so happy you went there, man, because I wanted to touch on that.
No, it's what is it? It's the U.S. government is the boogeyman and everything, and but it's never Russia or it's never China. Like, it's like the U.S. is the one who's going to do the alien false flag. I'm like, well, what the hell is everybody else going to do? Sit around and hang out? Again, but you've Greer has done interviews on RT, which, like I said, you can't pay for that. Now, shit, maybe they do pay for it. I don't know, but you can't pay for that kind of gold where they're talking about, that CIA's killed members of my team. I have to be careful. I mean, they're like, God, we have to call Oliver Stone for that kind of good stuff.
Right, man. Get him on the script. Well, let me ask you guys this, kind of in wrapping things up here. Where we are today, we have the Pentagon here in the United States flat out saying it's not Russia that we know of. It's not China that we know of. They're nowhere near where we are with advanced technology. And it's not US technology. So where does that leave us? I mean, a lot of the very pro UFO people are like, that's their way of saying it's aliens. It's aliens. Well, guys, calm the fuck down. Like, let's be completely honest here. But where does that leave us? What is the Pentagon trying to tell us, or what are they trying to tell other, adversaries in that statement that it's not them, it's not us? What could it be? I mean, where is the boogeyman in all of that, and why is this still a potential threat in their eyes? Who wants to comment on that? Britt.
I mean, it really could be a bird. And I need to explain myself by saying that.
Yeah,
right?
please.
It's that, well, I can imagine that they can look at, like, let's say flight logs to see if that was our technology. And so if it doesn't match up, well, obviously it's not. If it's not Russian or Chinese technology, well, this is an unidentified object.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not our tech. It's a little blob floating around. It could be a bird. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna try to
We've got an aspiring Mick West on our hands here.
This is amazing. Yeah.
A really fascinating seagull. But
so I mean,
She makes a point, though.
She makes a point, and I want to clarify it because I see it on Twitter when my name gets tagged every now and then. First and foremost, because it was to Zac. So Zac, I'd like to say that me and Tom Rogan were correct when we said we had 99% certainty that it was not U.S. technology or a foreign state actor.
Good call.
See what you did there.
Yes, that is what we said. But it was interesting because I've since people type, but McMillan and Rogan said it's alien, and I'm like, no.
No.
I said I was 99% certain it wasn't U.S. or not or state actor,
not man-made.
Right. That doesn't rule out, atmospheric phenomena. It doesn't rule out birds. It doesn't rule out. In fairness, it doesn't rule out aliens. I'm just saying,
exactly.
Based on the totality of what we have at hand, we can say with pretty good certainty there. And to answer your question, Ryan, what does that mean? I don't know. That's what's intriguing there. And I think for me, maybe it's not as my expectation isn't as broad that people are like, all 144 have to be alien. Quite frankly, I'm not even certain that in the balance of probabilities that alien is the best scenario of all the exotics, frankly. There's a lot of other exotic things. And in fact, Ancient Aliens have been running for 18 seasons. If you listen to that, they've been here for, how many tens of thousands of years. Shit, at what point are they native? Not alien anymore.
When are we the aliens? Yeah, for sure, man.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, you touch on something. That seems to be the narrative that's being pushed by a lot of people right now. Is it's not human, but we don't mean it's alien. So, what does that mean? We're hearing people say it's interdimensional, it's time travelers, it's this, it's that. It seems to be across the board. People like Elizondo, people like George Knapp, Jim Semivan, they're all saying, Eric Davis, that it's like a neighbor next to us that we never knew was there. What do you guys think about that?
Shadow biome.
Listen, I've always said that if I had to pick all of them, just because I like tragic irony, is that it turns out that it's we all live in a big simulation. We're all in some AI, and it's just the engineers in the system. And then we find that out. We're like, oh my God, this is horrible. It's something we don't want to know. It doesn't matter. You can be deleted at any moment. And so I don't know. That's it. There's. Maybe that's part of the fun is parsing through all the different, what ifs, what if?
Yeah.
Sure, it's fun. It's fun if
Super
it's
fun.
alien. It's fun. You know, maybe it's fun if they're people that live in the middle of the earth, or it's, you know, the man. I think Tom, since he's been the subject of our conversation significantly, I think it's Atlanteans, right? Isn't it? Atlantis is in
Hell
play.
yeah, man.
Yeah, just
Like,
like Aquafarians.
yeah. Why do
I
you think
wanna
this
know-
all happened off of Catalina Island? Like, come on.
They're wine fans. They like the Catalina wine mixer.
Tim.
Catalina
Yep,
wine
boom.
mixer.
We circle
Yeah.
back to Step Brothers. Well, I kind of want. All right, one more question for you guys before we wrap things up here. I've taken enough of your time. Where do we go from here? Like, we had everything Tom built up and kind of brought out. We now have a report that came out from the Pentagon. We've got the Department of Defense saying we're going to keep looking into it. We're going to put a full-time staff on this, and yeah, we're ready to like really tackle this subject with the American public. Like, where do you guys think we're going next with this when it comes to the government? And where do you want us to go with this, if they're even different? So, Zach, let's start with you, man. What comes next for the whole UFO question for you?
I don't think you know what you're asking here. So
here we go for another half hour. No, I'm kidding.
Oh man. Well, I'm gonna quote my friend Bradley, who I have conversations with all the time about this subject with. You asked, where do we go from here? And my only response to that is a statement. This sucks. It sucks. This really sucks. And the reason, I mean, I'm just being 100% blunt, right?
I love it.
It sucks because growing up, I always felt that there should be adults and officials and representatives and people that care about other people that represent me or something like that. And I think the idea that this entire story has managed to get as far as it has for as long as it has, now culminating in what we now see playing out, where we are saying it's not this, it's not that, and we're kind of playing games like, well, maybe it actually could be a bird because we didn't say. We just said not man-made. We didn't say it couldn't be a bird. But this is. I want to be like, just to be serious for a second. It's very serious. I don't like the idea of the game that we're being forced to play. To kind of put it in kind of Eric Weinsteinian terms. I feel like we're being forced to play a game where we don't have any information. Where all the information is behind classified walls, where all the people that could elucidate and help us understand this topic and understand what's going on, they won't talk. Where even the people that have been on the periphery as players, like Tom DeLonge, won't talk, not coming on my show, not coming on this show. This sucks. And I'm willing to say that it sucks. And I have hope on the basis of like what we're seeing play out that maybe we'll get to something like an answer. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like maybe we're also just all being played. You know, there's sort of like no version of this that isn't one of the biggest stories ever, and there's no version of this that isn't really kind of crappy because like we're being deceived. And it doesn't matter by who at this point. It just, for me, for someone who this topic affects personally, and it goes back a long time, I have a lot of frustration built up over all this stuff. And like, there's a reason why I'm like, McCasland, come on, man. Like, just clear this up. We need to start getting some facts in order, is how I feel. And, it starts with people coming forward and talking. I don't know any other way, because the government is so complex and so compartmentalized that the information that we need, I don't know if it's ever going to come out. So anyway, that's my really long answer to that.
No, man, I appreciate that, because I know you have a lot of personal stake in this topic, as many of us do. That's why we got involved with it. We're all into this topic of UFOs for our own personal reasons. And I think that's completely understandable that you're frustrated and that it sucks, because you're right. No matter where we turn, no matter who's saying what, it's all just a game. And we have to try to decipher every goddamn word they're saying to get to any truth. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to bring you guys together, not to like figure out, was McCasland the guy that Tom talked to? Because inevitably that doesn't mean shit at the end of the day, but it's a matter of trying to figure out where the core truth started with all of this that has happened in the past 3 years that everyone says is like the beginning of the real ufology, you know, with all these new people who've been interested in the topic, Britt included. And I'm not saying that like, you know, in terms of like in ignorance to the topic, like you have a lot to process and comprehend and go back and look at what has happened before all this. Because you look at a lot of the people who've been involved with UFOs for a long time, and they've been saying from the very start with all this Tom DeLonge stuff, like, you're going to get burned, you're going to get pissed, and you're not going to get any answers. And look at the conversation we're having right now. So no matter how much I love Tom DeLonge and his music, and like I bought the fucking t-shirt, I bought the books, like I'm sitting here myself being like, God damn, like just tell us something of substance that we can work on.
Right.
So that's my reckons. Britt, where do you stand on all of this? What do you want to happen next with all of this? And what do you have hopes for?
I have conflicting emotions.
Good.
And
I want to hear them. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, it's very conflicting because I understand the importance of our national security. And so, you know, I think the question is transparency or disclosure on this topic going to put us in more danger?
Yeah.
If it does, quite honestly, I don't want disclosure. I would prioritize the safety of the people before disclosure. On the flip side, though, if there is a way to be transparent, and you know, like you said, give us substance. None of this he say, she say, none of this like, oh, I've got an NDA, I gotta be behind. Give us substance. That is the main thing that drives me crazy about this topic, is that, and the reason why I dig so hard, especially considering that I've only been in this, like, what, a month and a half now? And
she literally looked at her calendar. I love that.
Yeah, look, the amount of information that I have pulled up, I have a stack of paper, like this thick already, of PDF files that I've printed out. Like these scientific reports that I've read through, you know, like just all kinds of stuff, right? And at the end of the day, you know, I'd like to have fact-based evidence, and I like to make like a belief or something behind that based on the facts, like infer the situation based on the facts. But at the end of the day, there's still hardly any substance. Just to explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. You know, like
seriously, yeah.
And so, like, if there's a way that you can explain it to not only me but the public in general, like we're 5 years old, what is actually going on, without putting us in danger, I'm all for it.
Explain it to me like I'm Tom DeLonge at an airport restaurant.
Exactly. No, I love that, Britt. And like the struggle, I think, for a lot of UFO people is we agree with you. Like, we don't want to risk national security. We don't want to, you know, hinder anyone's classification or security clearances, but we also want the information that we know hides behind those. But so it's hard. It's such a catch-22. That's why we drink. That's why we've been doing this for 70 plus years.
Kidding. But like another thing that we have to consider too is that, you know, I live in the South, right? I live in the Bible Belt. I've already talked to like my family and friends about this because, you know, like this is where my nose is at right now, right? You know, the majority of them have told me it's demons.
Yep.
A lot of people believe that being transparent and having disclosure about this is not going to really affect people in that way, but that is not true. I can say that from personal experience. I might have made like one status about it on Facebook. I hardly ever go on Facebook, right? But I did make one status about it. And one of my friends just went on there and said, you need to stop researching this because that's the devil pulling you in.
I've been told that as well. Yep. I've been told as well that what I do is a sin. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, that's another thing. There's just so many problems that could occur from being honest about the situation. But at the same time, it's just really like, what is more important, being honest? If ET is actually out there, or if parallel universes, if we're in a simulation, if we understand this and know this, and we have factual based evidence to prove this, what is more important? To keep the harmony? I don't know that answer. And that is something I still think about to this day. Like, I don't know the answer.
But it's a good question to ask. And I think, again, that's why we're at where we're at now. So, Tim, bring it home for us, man. What do you want next? What do you hope for? Like, do you have any faith that we're ever going to get answers? I know that's a lot, but
No, I was just thinking about what a shitburger it'd be. What if it really is demons? You know, like what if, like,
well,
holy
hey,
shit.
well,
Yeah,
and let's be upfront. We know that members of the Department of Defense and whatever ATIP, like a lot of them thought that. They were uber religious people who thought that this was demonic, and they said, "Stop going to Skinwalker Ranch. You're gonna fucking bring a demon out." Like this is real. These people's religious beliefs affect the information we're getting and the furtherance of science looking at this stuff.
Well, and strangely enough, as long as it remains unknown, I mean, can we write anything off?
Yeah.
But no, I totally actually what Zac said really resonates with me, and the same with what Britt said. And I think that the idea that it sucks right now is a good way of kind of summing things up. And I will say that without naming any names, that I think there's a lot of mainstream journalists who've been covering this in the last year, last few months, all of this kind of stuff, who feel the same way. Primarily because, okay, we got to this point. And I think that for me and my part of looking into this for the past couple of years was trying to determine if what was initially being said by people like Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, others, Tom, that there were objects of unknown origin that were unidentified, that were actually being encountered, within military airspace and, on highly sensitive surveillance systems, highly sophisticated integrated systems, which should be able to kind of weed out a lot of the other misidentifications that the normal person on the ground might not be able to. And I think when the report came out, that was substantiated. That that was validated. And so where we're at now is this idea that there's these unknowns that are encountered or captured on systems. That at least enough has been validated. So now from that point forward, in terms of what is it, I think the burden of proof is on the ones making the claims. And that's where I think the most frustrating thing, and that's where it sucks, like Zac said, and like Britt said, is where's the evidence base behind that, is that you cannot ask and you shouldn't ask or expect anyone, especially if you're talking about something that I want to make sure that we really put this into perspective as to what it is. If you're saying it's, quote, aliens, this would be the most significant discovery, in human history since the advent of language. It's a huge fucking deal. And so you cannot and should not be willing to ask anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a member of Congress or you're a random person on Twitter. You shouldn't get mad or expect anyone to accept that as being the absolute truth, or accept that as being what the conclusion is, without more than we have right now. The burden of proof lies on those ones making the claims. And so what, quote, it is and what is behind that, I think, it's going to have to come out. Somebody's going to have to prove that point. And I understand that for a lot of people, it's like, well, release some pictures and videos, but, it's going to have to be even more than that. When we're talking about something as significant as what some people claim that this is, and like you mentioned earlier, Riot, we're just we'll throw it under the umbrella of non-human something, technological origin. Yeah, even, especially in today's day and age where pictures and videos, can be altered, Photoshop. Like, you're not going to convince the world and people that's true with just a picture or video. And so I think the burden of proof is there. And so I'd say it sucks because I don't know where to predict where it'll go from here. Primarily because if it is a truly unknown, let's take what the government is saying at face value. It is truly unknown, and there is no crash Roswell bodies, or if there is, they've lost them. It's turned into Raiders of the Lost Ark. Just knowing how the government handles that, and Britt really touched on that, is you don't talk about that until it's known. You're not going to talk about it. And so I think that if there is going to be any resolution here, it's going to have to expand beyond the conversation that's just being had by the Department of Defense. Because, and I shared this when I did my kind of analysis of that report and tried to, I remember MJ, our editor, God bless him, love MJ, he's like, Jesus Christ, you give me like the history of intelligence here. And I'm like, no, I think it's important that people understand how intelligence is done, how the defense, intelligence works, and how that differs from science. Because people are like, where are the pictures and videos? That's science, ladies and gentlemen. Science is up front. It provides you all the data, all the information so that you can verify and replicate the results. That is not intelligence. And so, it's important there. And we're not going to get what people want from the Department of Defense. I know that's a real kick in the balls for some people. That's not how it works. And so I think that, short of, unless they're going to come out and say, all right, here it is something, it is X, it's aliens, it's whatever, then they would have to provide that data. But I think that it's kind of now parsing in the world where it is a legitimate scientific problem, and which means it's going to take actual research from scientists using sophisticated technologies to detect this stuff, and not just us being forced to go out there with some binoculars and take a video and post it on YouTube or whatever. So I hate to sound pessimistic, but I hope there's something different. And I think this is now for me where the point that, like you mentioned, Ryan, that people have been saying this, well, we've been down this road before, ladies and gentlemen. Well, they're not wrong. And so the question is, what's going to be different here? And so I think some of the biggest thought leaders here, I think it's on them. People like Lou or Chris or whoever, we're sitting here, I'd say it's on you guys now. If these claims are, that have been said, let's figure out a way to disclose that so that we can kind of come to that same conclusion.
Right. And Tim, I think you hit the nail on the head to kind of drive this all home. The burden of proof lies with those who have the claims. So those who have the claims, show us what that is. But also, I think the thing you stress mostly, and most importantly, is like, don't look to the Department of Defense for answers to this. Don't look to the Pentagon. It truly lies with our scientists. Like, that's what we've all been saying this whole time, is like, we want the scientific proof to understand these phenomena. Like, everyone has their own stakes in this, whether it's alien, interdimensional, time travelers, demons, angels. I don't care. Like, it lies in what we know here on our planet with the most brilliant people that we consider our most important scientists. So, like, I don't think it's pessimistic. I think it's hopeful that, like, science can now have an important place in this, because they have denied it for so long. First and foremost, it was like taboo to talk about this, to look into it. Still is in some respects. But look at how many independent scientists are willing to dive into this and work with the government. So I think you're right. Like, let's stop looking at the Pentagon for answers, and let's start looking at our scientists who are out there and crave things like this, like that burning curiosity of what comes next.
Let's present a scientific argument. Oh, sorry to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah, sorry. I was going to say, and just keep having these conversations, and like, we need to keep talking, and we need to the number one thing that I've learned in the time that I've been a part of this community is just like have empathy for each other. Like everybody's probably wrong.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
like
very true.
I'm not, I don't know, aside from Lou Elizondo, who very well might know all the secrets or whatever, like we're all probably pretty off the mark, or we have part of the truth or whatever. But you know what? Like the thing that matters is that we have each other's back and that we have empathy for one another. And look, this is a topic that like it affects people in ways that I don't think is appreciated often enough. Like people are very vulnerable, and like when the government releases a vague UFO report, you're not. Again, I mentioned this on UCR, but like you're not just gaslighting us, the UAP people or whatever. Like it's the whole spectrum of people that like they need something. They're all looking for something. And it could be the people that believe Dave Wilcock. Could be us who are a little more rational, right? Or it could be people that think it's all demons. And by being vague, I've talked to Tim about this. It's like this is almost like to the point where it's a bigger national security threat to continue to be vague,
exactly,
than whatever the truth is. Okay, and that's kind of where I've landed with this. But anyway, I didn't mean to interject there. Yeah,
you're spot on, Zach, and I think in fact it rolls right into exactly what I was going to say, which was there needs to be some scientific arguments presented here instead of emotional arguments.
Absolutely.
And that is on both sides, and I mean that, and that's what's been very frustrating for me, is because I have seen that same thing. Hats off to Mick West, even though I battle with him, and even though I was wrong recently in one of my battles, and was glad to say I was wrong to him. I have no problem with that. But at least he shows some type of experiments. He's trying to show something and prove something. And it becomes frustrating to me even when I've seen, because I feel like I keep hitting on the quote believers, but I want to say the critics and skeptics have been very frustrating, because it's I just read an article not long ago about how the threat of conspiracy culture and UFO culture, and coming from a psychology background, I'm like, that's an easy social psychology experiment. Make that a scientific argument, not an emotional argument, or you're just as bad as the people who are sitting there, saying it's aliens. And so that's what's frustrating, is there's a more palatable disagreement. It's like, well, this is much more acceptable for me to say, but it's not a scientific argument either. Prove that there's a link between conspiracy culture and UFOs. There may very well be, but that's a scientific argument. And so that's what's frustrating, is that on both sides, if you're going to dismiss it at this point, or you're going to prove it, make that argument legitimately, and let's not have an emotional argument. Because like Zach just said, as long as you keep it into emotional argument, then you're going to keep it into a realm of belief where it will be quasi-religious, and it's going to be, you will have zealots.
Exactly.
You're going to have a lot of emotion involved on both sides. And so we should all kind of be better than this. And like Zach said, and we should be willing to accept results no matter what they are, whether they prove it's not a bird or whether they prove it is a bird. We should be able to accept that, because at the end of the day, I'd like the real aliens, not the fake ones. The make
Right.
could be dolphins.
Or dolphins. Oh, guys.
Another thing
Yeah,
we
please,
have to
Britt,
remember-
please, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Another thing that we have to remember is that it is so healthy for a community to have people on opposing ends of the discussion, because just like Tim just said, you don't have somebody challenging a hypothesis. Eventually, it will purely be emotional, and that tends to lead into cult-like mindsets. And like I really don't understand why people do get so emotional over someone discussing the other side of the argument. If our goal here is to get to the truth, we need both people. It's simple as that.
Absolutely.
We don't need a cult.
Exactly. And I think, we look at, whether you're looking at a believer or a skeptic, it's not so much like the enemy is one another. Like we all are looking for the same thing, the truth. The enemy is the vagueness and the people who actually have the answers but aren't willing to bring them forward. Or maybe they don't know the answers. Like, that's a completely understandable thing too. Like, who maybe nobody has the answers, and we're all just using this malleable phenomena to like appease our own beliefs and whatnot. But that's a conversation for a whole other time. I think you guys, you hit the nail on the head. Like, this started as a conversation about like a possible general telling Tom DeLonge something, but I think we ended with like what's most important about this is like we just want a base truth, like Zac said, and we don't have that because we're just getting claims from the very start of all this stuff that's come forward in the past few years. So I'm glad we like went back and looked at this. Some people might not find it beneficial to their own research or interest, but I think it's important to like point out the fact that like this all started with this possible one man, McCasland, and nobody questioned it and nobody pushed it and nobody's challenging Tom DeLonge. And maybe that's because no one can get a hold of him. That's a whole other thing. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, just tell, like, if you're gonna make these claims, back it up. That's the most simplest way to say it. So I guess that's kind of where I want to leave it, guys. You've given me way over the time that I expected of you. So before we go, I want to know where we can find everything you guys are up to. So let's just go down the line. Zac, tell us where we can find everything you're up to, man.
Yeah, man, I'm still doing my podcast. It's just www.projecthuman.fm, and you can find me on Twitter at Zcichy or ZCICHY. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep on doing my thing.
Awesome. Britt, I know you have a new YouTube channel that's going to be premiering soon. You got a couple teasers up, so tell us a little about Inference, if you don't mind.
So Inference is just taking a whole, just a large amount of facts, putting it on a timeline, and then just presenting it to the audience, and they can infer what's going on based on this evidence. It will be covering the ET possibility, the PSYOPs possibility, just all kinds of possibilities and theories and viewpoints that have just being at the forefront of like this discussion. We'll be taking a good look at every single one of those viewpoints. Well, in this documentary that I'll be releasing soon. In fact, since I have gotten to speak to all of you, I did have to. I made the executive decision to push back the documentary. I'm learning
Sorry, Britt.
more than what I originally knew, and I thought
that's what happens.
I thought I was queen of research, but turns out might not be true. But you can find me at Inference. The first E is a 3.
Perfect.
But at Inference, first E is a 3 on Twitter, and just be looking out for that documentary. It should be coming out in August. And I'm
Sounds
really
good to me.
for it.
Awesome. Tim, hit us, my man. Where can we find everything you're up to? And when's the next big triangle photo coming out of the ocean gonna drop, brother?
Oh,
Where's the
I'm
triangle?
sorry. I'm sorry.
God.
I had to.
No, I don't. Dude, it's a running joke on the inside, bro. Like every article I put out, everybody's like, "But where's the triangle?" No, yeah, you can find me at OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe that's where we could find McCasland.
Right? Selling bikes. Anyway.
50
Yes.
bucks. Give him 50
Yeah.
bucks. He'll give you a bike and some answers. Yeah.
Dude, he could do a Corso book and make a bunch. You can find all our stuff at thedebrief.org. And so, putting out science, tech, innovative news stories, and obviously stuff that relates to UFOs or UAP when it's newsworthy. And so when we can kind of verify it, and we try to stay away from the sensationalized stuff. So if it's something we've got good going on, then we'll put it out. So you can find me there, or you can find me on Twitter at LT Tim McMillan, McMillan. Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
I do have a couple of things in the works, and so we'll see. But I don't tend to move as fast as UFO Twitter or some people like, but I hope I try to make sure it's thorough and all good info.
With good reason. I appreciate that. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's all the time we had for today on Somewhere in the Skies. I have to thank Zach. I have to thank Britt. I have to thank Tim for all your time today, guys. I hope we illuminated some of the mystery behind this whole McCasland thing. But I think more importantly, we brought up a lot of the other things that we should look forward to in terms of this topic. And just keep having these conversations. Like Zach and Britt said, I think that's very important. I think it's awesome that science is going to become a bigger part of all this. And there's a lot to look forward to, no matter what the naysayers might say. So with that, guys, I'm going to say goodnight, and I'm going to thank you once again for coming on Somewhere in the Skies.
Anytime, Ryan.
Thank you.
Anytime.